Dear learners, this session is on global challenges of sustainable development. Now we know the concept of sustainability is not solved by optimizing environment and quality at any price, but the search for virtuous relation among the different dimensions and like environment and social, and if you look into from territorial, economic and political sustainability, and then harmonizing basic needs, self-reliance, and eco-development. In today's uncertain world, and global challenges are becoming even more complex and sophisticated and necessitate a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach. So we need to understand the challenge. See, during COVID-19, the uncertain world, I mean, how much we the human are able to cope up with that sudden emerge of that disease. So the pressing global challenges faced by us can be looked into from an individual, as an organization, as a society. But it has a good potential and value proposition suited to contribute novel insight in regard to to grow the economy, that is business practice and then theoretical development. So we can, when we talk about the challenges from that perspective, we always talk about human population growth, then inequity, social disruption, gender, climate change, the way our like materialism, and then the how our this wisdom are vanishing from our ethical values, and these are some of the challenges. But I can look these challenges into two important way, two important direction. Two lengths. That is, one is we can look into their challenges, the fundamental issues. The under is more as an obstacles, major obstacles. When we look into fundamental issues, you will see that the degradation of environment, that is the basic causes of unsustainable world. You will see that that is because of population growth, and this issues can be looked into population growth, can be looked into what are its implications because of growth of population. The second is you will see that the way our economic system is growing, that's can be looked from the perspective of capitalist economic system, the way we are developing, nature of development. Plus, the source of everything. On the other hand, the bigger challenges in front of us is, if we look into that, is climate change. Then the obstacles what we have seen in achieving sustainable development is, as an individual with human have five important characteristics, that is pure impatience, selfishness, uncertainty, limited analytical capacity, and vulnerability. So when we look into that population growth and its implication, you will see today our population is reached more than 7 billion. That was 7 billion in 2011. Now we have crossed 7 billion. Beyond aggregate population growth, you will see demographic development is characterized heterogeneity in across the world, and they have different demographic transition in different stages at different country. On the other hand, global population growth is slowing. It is still high in developing countries. And while the world population as a whole is aging rapidly in other part of the country, but some countries are witnessing an increase in the proportion of youth in their overall population, like our country, India. So such diversity combined with persistent inequalities that in turn, we have seen a number of the migratory pressure both or within countries, nationally, internationally. So this kind of demographic trends pose major challenges for future development strategy. Also, we call it sustainable development strategy at all levels. So immense environmental problems are snowballing with economic growth tightly to large population of the world, and the large population of the world have expectation of growing. Since we want to increase our economy, that is the point. That's why in 1991, in one of Paul and Eric's publication, they wrote about a population bomb. In the 1960s, so this put out this, take out this Paul and Eric. Okay. The serious challenge that is created, that is in front of us in respect to population are, we will see in social perspective, we'll see food. One is food and agriculture and public health. Certainly all these being equal, highly populated and countries face greater challenges in these three areas. But with food resources, it is not. If you look about the food resources, it is not about lack of food globally or nationally that leads to famine. It's about in unequal distribution, and then you will see the inequality of economic resources and poor access to affected areas that are more critical factors. Right. This is because of the population growth. And we have seen that since 1960s, and we have the awareness about rapid population growth and that have direct impact on the environment, that bring to the massive family planning programs across the globe, especially in developing countries like one-child policy in China, then sterilization of both male and females in India, and then the policies stop at two-child policy in Singapore. So to comprehending the population factor in sustainable development equation, and we need to look into important issues. That is, the first challenge is in population is that it ironically has to do with the progress in medicine and public hygiene. And we need to improve sanitation, food security, clean water, medicine that enhance lifespan. For the more developed countries in the region as elsewhere in the world, we'll see 2000 mark as the beginning of the senior citizen population of the post-water boom. This aging in retired population will have ramification for healthcare needs and costs. Young people, age like young nation like India, we not see the livelihood security of this young group of population. So we need to understand all these things when we are trying to bring achieve sustainable development. Secondly, it is not only about the population size per se that is undermining the environment, but we'll see the rather lifestyle that cause environmental degradation and loss of biodiversity, right? So affluence supports a greater demand for material goods and services, you will see, and then we have to have more desires and wants, and creating a sense of wastefulness in human behavior. And we have 26% of the world population is industrialized country, and this 26% of the industrialized country account for 78% of the production of goods and services, 81% of energy consumption, then 70% of chemical fertilizers, and 87% of armaments they are using. So, and again, if you attack that figure at individual level, you will see one American spends as much energy as 7 Mexicans, 55 Indians, 168 Tanzanians, and 900 Nepals. The point is that because of the population growth, we have so much degradation to the environment on one side because of the number, but we have implemented in 1960s different programs and policies across the globe by different nations to control the population. That has also the impact. In that, for example, when we have number of people in some country, you will have the number of all people are increasing, but in the one side, we do not have proper health security for those people. And if we look into some of the young nations like India, we are not having that secure livelihood that we are not having livelihood security for them. These are some of the barriers or challenges we are having to bring sustainable development. Then the other is that you will see the capitalistic economic system. The economic system we are existing from the last few centuries that you see we have seen. So let us see. Though in the excitement over the unfolding of his scientific and technical powers, the modern man has built a system of production that revises nature and type of society that mutilates the humanity. If only there were more and more wealth, everything else, it is thought would fall into place. So we always talk about, wealth only, collecting the wealth. And money is considered to be all powerful. Even it is nowadays, we are also the same is happening. If it could not actually buy non-material values such as justice, harmony, beauty, or even health, it could circumvent the need of them or compensate for their loss. So from its nation development, nation development around 15th century or even earlier, we'll see the growth and development of capitalism has become almost universal economic engine for development around the world. Since the capitalistic system has become the abode valent of many environmental problems around the world, we need to set more light on historical development and global process. Capitalism first. In capitalism, the globality and universalism of economic system have been apparent since the rise in the 15th century or earlier. In capitalism, the relation between the nature, that is commodities, nature, that is natural resource, and the culture is mediated by prevailing mode of production. Capitalism is one of the three modes of production to which society is the past will expose. Capitalist mode of production is based on division of classes, those who control the means of production and those who produce surpluses, which continuously recreates that differentiation. So the growth and development of capitalism has thus become a self-perpetuating economic system because it first develops in human, the human beings a desire for materialism and a class differentiation, and then seeks to fulfill those materialistic wants and status needs in productive terms. So such human desires, needs, and wants affect the culture and societies. Then capitalistic modes of production are too embedded in society, especially in consumption habit, styles of living, conspicuous consumption, materialistic goods, and the growing expectation for a better quality of life that unfortunately is defined by the way of capitalistic demands. So the ecological problem in a developing country is a product of several outcomes of this kind of capitalist ecosystem. Firstly, ecosystem in developing countries are exploited to fulfill the need for raw materials and natural resources for urban consumption patterns in the developed countries. By and large, you will see it is the developing countries that bear the weight of the ecological footprint of urban dwellers in developed countries. Secondly, the developing countries as well are the suppliers of raw materials and natural resources for the industrial and service-oriented economies of developed world. Then thirdly, you will see trading patterns between North and South are unequal, exploitative, and favor the developed country. That is happening. Fourthly, we will see the problem with capitalism and the supposed pro-development organization like the World Bank and the International Monetary and the IMF means International Monetary Fund is the commodification of environment and goods such as water, energy, land, and other social services that make it easy for institution and power broker to accumulate wealth by appropriation and disposition. Finally, we will see that one has to ask whether the current capitalist system predicated on the materialism and consumerism is a sustainable economic system for developing countries, not only developing countries, across the world. The never-ending multiplication of economic demands, if it is continued, whether it will have serious effect on the environment. Then again, if we look into nature, the way of nature of development, we will see that development is often intertwined with the notion of modernization. If you look into some of literature, we will find out that development is very much a product of political vision, policy and ideology, and national management capabilities. Unfortunately, in many of developing countries, development is often out of nationalistic rhetoric and political ideology with little realistic application. Within this orbit of nationalism, development gets translated into status-making symbol forms of building activity. Like at the end of the developments, they put developments about building new airports, golf courses, monuments, government buildings, sports complexes, cultural center, museum per se. But actually it is not. And if you go back to 1949, what Harry Truman doctrine of the fair deal, it was accepted by the United Nations as the panacea for the third world through a total restructuring of underdeveloped society in that time. That policy and the program that affect after 50 years of implementation. And it brings amazing ethnocentric arrogance at the best life. Instead of the prosperity, progress, and abundance promised by theories and politicians from the developed world, the dream turned into a nightmare for developing countries because of that doctrine. After 50 years or more than 50 years, the third world is still haunted by the specter of debt crisis, famine, malnutrition, disease, violence, and poverty. So this is the product of way of development. Then climate change is is one of the important, one of the key challenges we are facing in achieving sustainable development. As we know, the change in science, technology, art, and culture are stimulated by diversity. Then global capitalism exploit all forms of diversity for profit, and while so doing, risks destroying that every diversity with dangerous consequence for people and the environment. Then climate change also put pressure on natural resources that are essential for sustaining human civilization. The details of the climate change you will come in the you will have differentiation. So I will not go into detail about climate change. Once Kofi Annan, United Nations General Secretary in 2001, Mr. Kofi Annan said, I quote, our biggest challenge in this new century is to take an idea that sounds abstract, sustainable development, and turn it into reality for all the world's people. Therefore, without the understanding of individual commitment, motivation, and goal, it will be very difficult to move forward towards a human dream of sustainability. So, from that point, the crucial challenge is either to get most of the peoples of the world thinking about sustainability or stimulate informed policy that creates structural solutions so that sustainability itself may be advanced while people march mindlessly through their days. As a human, pure impatience is a natural human tendency to prefer rewards earlier rather than later, and to want to postpone losses, pain, or other sacrifices. We never bother about future outcomes are simply devalued or discontinued, even if no issue of uncertainty are involved. This you can explain this in everyday behavior as the failure to stay on the diet, tempting food, because we never, try to keep our diet because we are tempted with the foods which are unhealthy. Like we can say, we are very fond of the junk food and all this. Then the choice to buy instead of saving, addiction to cigarette and drugs, extra. You will see these are the pure impatience. So in the sphere relevant to sustainable development, we can say this impatience is reflected in lower saving and more consumption, and also in reluctance to submit to economic policy reform that require immediate sacrifices to ensure longer term gains. However, that sometimes human beings are remarkable patient is in our willingness to save for our children education, to hold disagreeable jobs until retirement so on. So the point is that when we talk about from a sustainability point of view, in a greater perspective, we look into others, limitation. So we do not look into long-term benefit. We are very purely impatient. We want everything to, immediately, the result of our action immediately. Then comes the selfishness, which is defined as the greater concern that people have for their own outcomes and those people close to them and those of others. This selfishness can be goes by the extent to its benefit or goes to self only, to our neighbors only, to our, more weighted heavily than benefit of goes to others. And this narrowness in how people define self that may be extend to the individual only, the ultimate self is individual or to immediate family, extended family, or broader communities. So it is variously defined in different way. So we can look this as a term of circle of ethical concern or concept of moral unity that expands from family to clan to class to nation to a coalition of nation and then humanity. But the obvious problem of selfishness is that many of us do not extend this circle of ethical concern much beyond the individual or to their immediate family or to immediate society. So this selfishness is the root cause of externalities, that is the fact that people often do not fully bear the positive or negative consequence of their own action. If people harm others without bearing the consequences, they often lack the inhibition against taking the harmful action. Although, see, these externalities are relevant to immediate action, far-sighted action are particularly challenged by externalities both in negative and positive. The further into the future of an outcome may be harder as it is to assign credit or blame for more immediate action. Causal links become fuzzy when attributing responsibility, and those responsible are often no longer in a position to be rewarded for far-sighted behavior or punish for far-sighted. For example, those who plan and authorize a highway that cuts through ecological sensitive habitats are unlikely to be held accountable for ecological damage that occurs a decade later. Another problem what we can see is as moral hazard problem. You will see a variant of negative externality that arises when people take unreasonable risks, for example, building houses in the floodplains, and because others will bear some or all other costs, then the principal agent problem that arises when those interested to act on behalf of others uh, and to pursue their own interests at the expense of the principals. In this sense, for example, the forestry officials, agents, acting on behalf of the public to provide stewardship of the forest, that they may benefit personally or organizationally from short-sighted decisions that do not serve public interest, for example, by permitting excessive logging. So, there's some of the selfishness. Then the another characteristic is we have one of the obstacle is the uncertainty. That is defined as a more certain short-term reward often prefer to less certain long-term gains, even if the long-term gains would be much more impressive if they were achieved. In terms of motivating action, the question is not what outcomes would actually occur, but rather what people can expect to occur, which involves reducing the expected future benefit if it is uncertain that can be achieved. Uncertainty is about the future tends to increase as time horizons are extended, as demonstrated by the fact that longer-term predictions are systematically less accurate than shorter-term predictions. Thus, uncertainty reduces the expected longer-term gains and losses and the values that people assign to them. For example, in undermining the hope that investment will succeed, uncertainty reinforces the impact of pure impatience in reducing the incentives to choose saving and investment over immediate consumption. Next obstacle we'll see is limited analytical capacity. In addition to the intrinsic uncertainty about the longer-term future, the limitation of assessing implication also reduces the value that people will assign to more distant benefits and costs. Given this, a typical preoccupation with today's challenges and focus of attention to the longer term is often lacking. Both long-term benefit and long-term risks may not even we may not recognize that. Even if we recognize that analytical shortcuts are frequently employed when capacity for more thorough analysis is lacking, and because of that, we often introduce the biases. So it is important to note, however, that analytical capacity can be strengthened because the critique against assumption of complete rationale does not imply that nothing can be done to improve the evaluation and selection of alternative. The another obstacle is vulnerability. In many circumstances, even those who desperately want to act far-sighted believe they simply cannot. For example, the poor farmer who'd like to plant trees but worries about the need for immediate care if a child becomes ill. Then political leader who would like to adopt far-sighted policy reforms but fear political imposition or even for their lives. So vulnerability can lead to strategic impatience and to taking the short-term option not because of the impatience of temperament but rather because of the realization that vulnerability to emergencies, attacks, unavoidable losses, etc. makes long-term action infeasible. So the conclusion is that in the past, we'll see resource scarcity was often presented a critical challenge, but much of the 20th century resource pressures actually fell. The combination of rapid economic expansion, continued population growth, and a changing climate raises the specter of resource scarcity. This is how that is how the population is an important key to the challenges of achieving sustainable development. There is a significant scope for substitution in many areas, yet certain forms of natural capital, including the ecological services they provide, cannot be replaced by man-made capital. Their exploitation has thus to be limited so as to preserve the overall capacity of ecosystem to provide those services. In today's discussion, we have looked into what are the important basic challenges to in sustainable development that can be looked into that one fundamental look into two ways that is as a fundamental issue is a broader context of population growth, how population growth have direct impact into this environment. Other implication like the growing population, how we have to support their livelihood, then the way our economic system is affecting to the system, then the way our nature is developing, the way the nature of development we are following. And as you know, climate change is one of the important this challenges or fundamental issues in achieving sustainable development. And to bring or to fight all those issues and challenges, and first and foremost, we need to understand the obstacles at from individual point of view as a human, because it is our sole responsibility uh, to protect our planet or to bring a sustainable or global to have a global sustainability. It is our responsibility. So our basic obstacles are, are characters like pure impatience, selfishness, uncertainty, limited analytical capacity, and vulnerability. So let us we'll see. Thanks all.